This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks. So good evening, and I'm glad you're here. We're going to be starting with the lymphatic system, and then we'll get into the immune system next chapter. So know that when we're talking about the immune system, we're talking about a functional system that works in the lymphatic system works in conjunction with the cardiovascular system, and it also works with other body systems as well, as far as the integument and such, the skin, in order to provide protection for the body from different pathogenic microbes and such. So we are going to, I think this stuff is cool. It's very interesting, fascinating information, and I hope that you'll enjoy as we go through this here. So again, we'll take a break after the lymphatic system PowerPoint has gone through for just a brief little break, and then like a couple minutes, and then we'll get into the immune system PowerPoint. All right, so let's start with sharing the slideshow here. So when we talk about the lymphatic system is a series of different structures as well as vessels that are carrying lymph. And this fluid lymph is as a result of the plasma leaking out of capillaries and then being drawn up into these lymphatic capillaries and then sent through the body and passing through different structures like lymph nodes in order to look for any type of pathogenic type of microorganisms that would be considered non-self, that would be considered pathogenic, disease causing, and the body's immune system will respond in kind to those antigens, we would call them, okay? So you'll see here that the lymphatic system uses these lymphatics, these vessels, these lymph capillaries, these lymph vessels. They contain valves, all right, to allow for only one way of movement of the lymph towards the cardiovascular system, towards the right side of the heart, which will drain these lymph fluid back into the blood. Okay. Lymph is involved in controlling the fluid levels in the body and those that are in the extracellular fluid, right, surrounding the different organs and capillaries and that are not present within the actual blood vessels or organs or blood vessels. This lymph, again, it's the plasma, the liquid portion of the blood, and we're going to see how it will then carry this lymph fluid to these lymph nodes and other structures present within that will look for any type of harmful microorganisms, and there are cells that are going to be present that will help to destroy them. Okay. Now, draining interstitial fluid from tissue spaces, preventing edema. So if any of you, so I know that there are a good portion of you that are working in healthcare and as medical assistants or as practical nurses, LPNs, you'll see patients that have issues with peripheral edema and their lower extremities are swollen, and many times this is as a result of congestive heart failure, and we talked about that last PowerPoint presentation regarding the cardiovascular system. Now know that in addition to the heart pumping and doing what it needs to do, the lymphatic system also helps to manage the removal of excess tissue fluid and such, okay, and preventing edema. So share with you personal information regarding my mother had breast cancer going back a few years ago, and she had her right breast removed as well as her some lymphatic tissue, some lymph nodes present on the right side of her body, right upper extremity. And as such, she is prone to having edema of her right upper extremity because lymph vessels and nodes have been removed from that area there. So it doesn't manage the fluid present within that right arm. Now she does well because she'll exercise and she'll do wear a sleeve on occasion, as well as doing some lymphatic massage. These all help to allow for her arm, her right upper extremity, to really be only a little bit larger in comparison to the left side. Okay? But the lymphatic system, very important for removal of this interstitial fluid. Transport of digested fat to the blood. Okay, this is important as far as for these lacteals. Let's see here, Kyle. I'm going to see what you're saying here. Yeah, Kyle, understood. Yep. Now know that they can, Kyle, that there are different treatments and such that can really help manage CHF. But yes, it is scary though. Understood. And my thoughts and prayers are for your grandma there. Seriously, I know what it's like. We've had my wife's grandfather in particular, sure, Kyle, that had issues with congestive heart failure, and it's not an easy road to travel, indeed. So you'll see here that the lymph that contains the fat is called chyli. Right, we call this chyli, and it's present within the small intestine because where do we have absorption of nutrients and such? It takes place in the small intestines, in particular in the duodenum, but also in the jejunum and ileum. The duodenum is really where we have primary digestion taking place. Right, the next step down from the stomach. And we'll talk about that soon. As far as the ability to develop immunities and to actually develop an exposure to these microbes and such that will then lead to a memory via memory T and B cells. This is very important. And this is part of what we would say your specific immune response would be. And then producing mature lymphocytes. And these are, again, these T and B lymphocytes, which will have specific functions that we'll talk about today. So you see here, these vessels are present, and these vessels are what we would say is blind end tubes, meaning that they're not directly connected to the heart as far as for the pumping action of the heart. Hence, they have valves present to allow for only one-way flow toward the heart. And if those valves are compromised, say in the case of elephantiasis, where there are parasites, these worms are present that are present within the lymphatic capillaries, and they block the valves and they block the movement of lymph from the lower extremities up towards the heart. It's really a bad thing and can lead to severe edema as well as changes in the skin, hence the term elephantiasis. It's lymphatic filariasis is the proper term. This elephantiasis creates the skin to really be very tough as far as mimicking an elephant's hide. So yeah, it's a nasty illness. And again, transmitted by flies, not flies, mosquitoes, mosquito bite. It's terrible, terrible stuff. So these lymphatic vessels, really very important as far as moving this lymph and draining into the cardiovascular system via the thoracic duct on the left side and the right lymphatic duct on the right side. Okay, so there's two areas, and we're going to see as far as in an image here. Let's see here. Here we go. I'll come back in a moment, but you'll see here as far as the right lymphatic duct, the thoracic duct here, we have the left side of the body drains the lower extremities, the abdominal pelvic region, and the left side of the upper extremity and left side of the head. The right side of the body, right, is only drained as far as you'll see here, the right lymphatic duct by the right side of the head, the right extremity, and the right chest. Okay, so it's just a little different there. So that thoracic duct on the left side really does work at draining the majority of the body. And you'll see here that, folks, it's draining into the subclavian, right? So here we have brachiocephalic vein, and then here's subclavian. So right here, we have that thoracic duct, and here again, we have that right lymphatic duct. And let's see if there's another image. Here we go. Good, yeah. So you're seeing here that we're then taking this blood, this lymph, it's connected to the cardiovascular system, and then it drains right directly into the right side of the heart, into the right atrium. Okay. All right. So you'll see here as far as lymphatic tissue is concerned, right? Lymphatic tissue is unique tissue in that there is reticular tissue present. The reticular tissue containing these reticular fibers. These reticular fibers are fine collagenous fibers, okay? So when you recall in AMP1, we looked at the tissues of, say, like areolar connective tissue. In areolar connective tissue, you saw that there are those thick pink fibers that were the collagen fibers, very strong, and then you saw the thin fibers, which were the elastic fibers, as well as multiple cells and such present within. Well, reticular fibers are finer than the elastic fibers, but they're made up of collagen, so they are strong. They're just very fine as far as their presentation. And this is what allows for the uniqueness of this lymphatic tissue, which will able to also trap these microorganisms within these reticular fibers. I think someone else is trying to contact me and sell me an auto warranty. I don't know how many times a day you folks receive those calls, but they're always exciting and fun. So, lymphatic organs. So we have encapsulated and non-encapsulated. And so this is important as far as you'll see that when we're talking about the kidneys and the adrenal glands. Recall that in particular, we were just looking at endocrine tissue, and the adrenal tissue has those capsule around, and then we have the different layers as far as for the cortex and as far as for also the medulla. You'll see this in the kidneys, that when we talk about the urinary system, encapsulated. Here we have the lymph nodes, spleen, and the thymus glands. They are encapsulated. Non-encapsulated would be this malt type tissue, this mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. And this is in areas where, say, the tonsils, Peyer's patches would be present within the digestive system, digestive tract, and the vermiform appendix, or the appendix, you can call it, right? This would be non-encapsulated types of lymphoid tissue. And here we have an example as far as the ring of protection that your tonsils provide for your body, as far as anything entering into the oral and nasal cavity, and then entering into the digestive and respiratory tracts. Okay, you'll see here that the pharyngeal tonsil, this would be called the adenoids by patients who, are not medically inclined there. They'll just say, oh, I had my adenoids removed, or even the physician will say, we're going to remove your adenoids. This is what we're looking at as far as the pharyngeal tonsil. Then we have here the tubal tonsils, right? These are surrounding, and I haven't mentioned this. I didn't mention this in when we looked at the sagittal head, but really that little opening for the eustachian tube that will enter into the nasopharynx, which is in this region right here. Those tubal tonsils are surrounding the openings for the eustachian tube into the nasal cavity. Then we have the palatine tonsils. When a patient says, my tonsils are swollen, this is the tonsils that they're talking about, would be the palatine tonsil. Here you have the roof of the mouth, and here's the oral cavity, folks, oral cavity. And then lastly, we have here the lingual tonsil, okay? And that's at the base of the tongue. So you see the tongue right here, and here's at the base of the tongue. All right, so you'll see here these lymphatic nodules, dense aggregations of lymphatic tissue, right? Very important. And again, like I said before, they form this ring of protection, protection against bacteria and other antigens that can enter into the nasal and oral cavities and act as a first line of defense. Here again, we're looking at the images of lymphatic circulation. And by the way, too, you can see here that there's these little dots and such. Those are the lymph nodes and such. And so you've all more than likely palpated on yourself, or someone else touched, palpated on your cervical region and your shoulders, swollen lymph nodes as a result of some type of infection that you may be fighting, or a child that you have that may be fighting an infection. Here's an image, a good image, just showing you regarding the lymphatic vessels and what's going on as far as that at the distal portion of these vessels would be where there's an interaction between the area where capillaries are present, and the capillaries are allowing fluid, right, plasma, to leak out of the capillaries. Okay, so not only is nutrients and oxygen exchange taking place here, but also we're actually leaking from the capillaries fluid, this plasma, the liquid portion of the blood, and then it's being drawn up by these lymphatic capillaries. So again, I said to you that the lymphatic capillaries are not directly attached, connected to the heart, so they're not connected to a pump. So as fluid is moving through the capillaries, it's as a result of different things like your contraction of skeletal muscle and movement allows for the fluid to move from distal to proximal up to the right side of the heart, right? Into the right thoracic duct and the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct on the left side. So lymph nodes, so I'm going to say something to you important here, right? So lymph nodes are within the network that will filter lymph. This is very important. Now, the case of the spleen will filter blood. So the spleen will filter blood and it'll be a reservoir for blood, and we'll talk more about it in a moment there, but the lymph nodes filter lymph. And what they're doing is they're looking for any type of pathogens, any type of antigens that are present that could make you sick, okay? And there are cells present within the lymph nodes that are immune cells that are present that can attack and mark them for destruction, okay? So very important. And also know that your lymph nodes really work to also look for any type of cells that are viral infected, that are cancer cells that have been mutated of our own body cells, and mount an immune response also, okay? Now, interesting here, you'll see we have these vessels that will leave and enter. So afferent vessels, right, are bringing lymph to the node. Efferent vessels are draining the node. Now, the efferent vessels, there are fewer, so that this way it slows the flow of lymph through the node, okay? There are trabeculae present, and there are different compartments present within the node that house the different cells, right, that are present, that and reticular fibers and such create those trabeculae that will allow for then a slowing down of the lymph through there in order to then look for any cells that could quite possibly make you sick, okay? And substances are removed via phagocytosis, right? So this is a form of endocytosis, a form of cell eating, right? Bringing materials into the macrophage would be one in particular. Let's see, neutrophils would be another, okay? There's these different types of cells that are going to be involved in phagocytosis and processing of these cells that are infected, right? You'll see here also cancer cells migrate to the lymph nodes trapped and rapidly divide. They can move from lymphatic system to the blood, which will spread the cancer throughout the body, and this is not a good thing, right? And so this is how we end up having metastasis of cancer cells from one area of the body to the other, to another. And you'll see here, as we have then the afferent vessels and the efferent vessel, okay? And you'll also see that there are valves present, right? Again, allowing for one-way flow of lymph in the lymphatic system. And you'll see here that there are lymphocytes present, there are neutrophils present, there are macrophages, there are plasma cells. Plasma cells are a type of differentiated B lymphocyte that will produce antibodies. And so that's very important that they're present there in order to mount a specific immune response to whatever they're being exposed to, right? And so really these are all involved in your immune process and present within the lymph nodes. Very important. Immune surveillance is what we would say. They're looking for cells that are bad and that are infected and that can cause you to get sick, right? You'll see here that lymph circulation, so interstitial fluid, is the plasma in the interstitial spaces. Know that really throughout your body, there's no dryness, right? The only dry area of your body would be your skin, your integument, right? Because everywhere else that is live cells, they need to be moist. And so part of that moisture, even inside of your body, would be this interstitial fluid, okay? Let's see here, water plus solutes. So, you know, present within the lymph can be the plasma itself, which is the liquid portion of the blood, which can contain ions, right? Nutrients, gases, some proteins. The cells can be hormones, enzymes, waste products. Enzymes, recall, are proteins involved in breakdown of large molecules into smaller molecules, facilitating reactions, okay? Now, lymph circulation, I said this to you before there, just began with saying that skeletal muscle contractions, the ability, just you moving, and know this, folks, and I'll say this and I'll say this again, movement is life. So when our patients are not moving, this leads to all kinds of health issues, right? But really, the ability for you to move helps to move the lymph throughout your body. So skeletal muscle contraction compresses the lymphatic vessels, forces lymph, again, in one direction because of those valves that are present. Okay. Respiratory or breathing movements contribute to movement of the lymph in your body, as well as smooth muscles present within the lymphatic vessels. So these trunks are larger vessels. Okay, so these are larger vessels. I'm not going to ask you to memorize these, okay, but just know what they are as far as that they are present in different areas of the body and draining different sections of the body, okay? But again, too, you do need to know this as far as that the thoracic duct for the left side of the body, the right lymphatic duct for the right side of the body, and the presentation as far as just if you memorize that, the right lymphatic duct just drains the right side of the head, the right chest, and the right upper extremity. Thoracic duct, all else. Okay, and again, draining into the subclavian veins, which will bring deoxygenated blood as well as lymph to the right side of the heart via the superior vena cava. Okay. Now, the thymus gland. Thymus gland is a very interesting gland, and very it's increased. It's larger as we're young. Okay, as we develop and get older, it will decrease in size and will not be as important as far as its function as it was for a toddler, a youngster, a child. And as they get into puberty and such, then once you hit adulthood, it starts to decrease in its size and its function. Lymphatic, yes, so the lymphatic circulation. So yeah, just because of the fact that you're, it's just not as necessary as it was when you were younger there. So that circulation, right? So know that as far as the trunks are concerned, these are just larger lymphatic vessels that are all contributing to bringing it to, whether it's to the right side of the body as far as from the right chest, right upper extremity, and right side of the face, that would be draining into the right lymphatic duct. The thoracic duct drains everything else, lower extremity, abdominal pelvic, the left side of the chest and the left upper extremity, left side of the head, thoracic duct, which will then both of them drain into, so the thoracic duct for the left side, left subclavian, right lymphatic duct into the right subclavian, which will then enter into then the eventually into the superior vena cava into the right side of the heart, right atrium. Okay. So again, the thymus gland, very important. And so what you'll see here, folks, is that the thymus gland is involved in, you're welcome, is involved in the maturation of T lymphocytes. There are B and T lymphocytes. T lymphocytes mature here, okay? And then B lymphocytes mature in the bone marrow, okay? And the B lymphocytes produce and differentiate and become plasma cells, which these plasma cells will in turn become factories for the production of antibodies. And we'll talk more about that. But know that the T lymphocytes, the B lymphocytes, they're both involved in your specific immune response. Okay. And so B and T lymphocytes also have a memory. And so these memory T and B lymphocytes live for many, many years, providing you as a person an immune response, a specific immune response to something that you may have been exposed to 5, 10 years ago. And yet you'll provide a specific, quick, fast immune response because of those memory T and B lymphocytes. Okay, so pretty cool stuff. And then the T lymphocytes, we'll talk about in more detail as far as their role, as far as helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So let's see here. Oh, know that as far as folks that suffer from myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is a muscle weakening disease, and really it's a horrible illness, and it can be devastating for the patient who's suffering with it, and they can really have major issues with fatigue and the ability even to eat and breathe, right? And they find that by removal of the thymus gland, they're able to make quite a dramatic difference as far as the presentation of the response to the illness for this patient suffering with this chronic illness. Some will be able to like go off of medication. Like there's percentages that are pretty high as far as at least a good 50% respond in some way to a removal of the thymus gland, which is huge for a patient who has trouble just being able to talk. They get fatigued, their skeletal muscle over a period of time by just speaking or eating or drinking. Breathing can be sometimes affected also. So it's really, myasthenia gravis is a horrible illness. I said to you there before regarding maturation of the T cells is taking place here. And so it's really involved, again, the thymus gland in your immune response, as far as your specific immune response. And again, this is important also. You'll see here where it says the remaining T cells can react to antigens, but not healthy body tissue. See, if your immune system is responding to your own tissues, as we've talked about when we were talking in the endocrine system, folks, you don't want to have that happen where you're providing an immune response to your own healthy tissue. That's terrible, and that's not a good thing. The spleen. So I said to you, as far as the lymph nodes are concerned, they filter lymph. As far as the spleen is concerned, it filters blood. Okay, but it's also involved in this whole response as far as your immune response, and it's the largest mass of lymphatic tissue. Okay, and know that if your spleen swells, right, if there's edema present within your spleen, and you take a fall, you take a hit, you can end up having a very catastrophic situation occur, because it does house, it acts as a storage, a reservoir for excess blood. And see here it says store blood for release during hemorrhage. Well, if the spleen itself is what bursts, right, this can be a major problem, and this can be a medical emergency, and patients die as a result of that. So say like in the case of like the Epstein-Barr virus, infectious mononucleosis, a patient can have swelling of the spleen as one of the side effects and such from, symptoms of the illness. And if they don't know about it, or they just feel a little tired, but they don't know about it, they can actually suffer if they take a fall, or if there was a gentleman years ago involved in playing high school football. He gets tackled and his spleen bursts and he ends up dying as a result. So terrible, terrible stuff. But you'll see here also that phagocytizes worn out red blood cells. So like your macrophages would be involved in this. The monocytes that differentiate after a few days and become macrophages can recycle old red blood cells, erythrocytes, produces lymphocytes and B cells, right? These plasma cells, okay? Doesn't so much produce them, because know this, that's not really correct. Tamana is bigger than just noted. Yes, that's correct, Norma. And that I would say that there's studies have shown that there's like 90% of in the high 90s, maybe mid 90s % of the United States population that adults have the Epstein-Barr virus, and it doesn't make everyone sick, but just know that many people do test positive for that virus and they don't get sick, but some do. Right? Let's see here. But really, yeah, getting back to this here, really, your spleen really is involved in, storing of blood and such, and of these different cells. But really, it's the red bone marrow that's producing these blood cells. Okay, so that I should correct that. I need to correct that. And I said to you about this reservoir for blood. All right. As far as white and red pulp present within the spleen. So let's just, do I provide an image? No, I don't have an image here. Okay. You'll see here that the white pulp present in the spleen. Let's look at an image of the spleen. Let's see here. These are immune. Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you. It's just a matter of that. Just, yeah, so Udos, just know that. So let me come back here for a moment. Just know that really the spleen is not, yeah, no problem. The spleen is not producing, it's not producing these cells. The red bone marrow is producing the cells. But these cells are present within the spleen because they're involved in the immune response. So just know that, okay? Okay, yeah, here we go. Okay, so this is just a simple image, but it does help. And actually, I can post this. I can actually post this image for you all. So it's just showing you here, folks, that the white pulp is associated with what? The red vessel, which would be the artery, right? And the red pulp is associated with the veins, okay, the venous blood. That's all I wanted to just give you that example and show you there. And that there are, again, too, trabeculae present within the spleen, as well as there are trabeculae present within the lymph nodes, okay, to help slow down whatever fluid is passing through. In the case of the spleen, it's the blood. In the case of the lymph nodes, it's the lymph. Okay, let's see here. And you'll see here as far as, let's see here, so blood flows through at 3 different rates: fast, slow, and intermediate, right? And all depending upon the control by the nervous system. You'll see here as far as slow flow is via open circulation. Blood percolates through the splenic cords, right, in the red pulp, containing monocytes and macrophages. So it's important to note that there are these cells present that have immune function that are also present in the spleen. Like I said to you, that they were present in the lymph nodes. They're also present in the spleen and can react and look for performing immunosurveillance. Look at here, it destroys defective red blood cells, right, erythrocytes, and remember they're about 110 days, detects and responds to foreign substances, antigens, and again, too, like I said to you, that reservoir for blood. And again, if it's swollen, then there's more blood present within, and that can be dangerous. So lymphedema. So lymphedema here, we're having issues as far as what's taking place as far as in the extremities, whether it's the upper or lower extremities, right? There's issues with damage or removal of lymph nodes and vessels. And that's what I mentioned to you regarding my mother and her right upper extremity, as far as those nodes and vessels were removed due to issues with cancer cells spreading, right? Metastasizing from the breast. Congestive heart failure, lymphatic filariasis, that's that elephantiasis disease, right? You see there, parasitic infection, mosquito is the vector, like I said, and Milroy's disease, which is a congenital lymphedema. And actually, we know of a little girl in a church that we attend that has this and suffers with this congenital lymphedema. And I have to tell you, I am forever impressed with young people and their response to illness. Folks, I think it shames us all as adults when I see, and I've seen it all the years of practice, how these little young people are able to handle health issues in a way that just it astounds me, and it just amazes me. And this little girl I'm thinking of that suffers with this congenital lymphedema, what a sweet young little girl. And even, with the issues that kind of prevent her from doing some things, she's still as active as possible. And sometimes they have to like say, honey, no, you gotta chill out a little bit and relax. But what a spirit this child has. It's just oh golly, how old is she? She must be about almost 10 now, but we've known her for quite a few years, since she was even real little. And I'm telling you, it's amazing. Does anybody, let me ask you this, I'll stop for a moment here and we'll come back. Is anybody interested in pursuing pediatrics at all? No? Oh, okay, Jen. All right, cool. Yeah. It's not an easy field, to be honest, because little people, it's harder sometimes in order to treat them. Yeah, Kayla, cool. But I have to tell you, so in my practice, I was a family type practice. I mean, I took care of work comp and auto accident, that kind of a thing, personal injury. But I also did, my practice took in infants to geriatrics. So from the little babies to the my oldest patient was, in the 90s and such. I don't think I took care of a 100-year-old patient. I think it's more in the high 90s, which was pretty astounding. But yeah, so but working with little ones and and being able to make a difference for them and them feeling better, the satisfaction that they get from the gratitude that they show as a result of being helped is it's precious. It really is precious. Cool stuff. I would say that that's one of the things I miss about being in practice. I have to say, right? I mean, I miss my patients, I do. And I miss the little ones in particular because I so enjoy, working with them and helping them. But now I have my grandkids, so it's all good. All right, folks, I'm going to hide everyone. I'm just going to see. Yeah, cool. Okay, Kelsey, very good. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so nice. Yeah, it's something to consider for sure. All right here. So let's move on with this as far as no. Okay. Yeah, so you'll see here as far as treatment. So can there be pneumatic types of compression devices, stockings, sleeves, wraps, massage, movement, exercise, right? And movement with massage and surgery. Yes, these can be helpful in order to manage lymphedema. But I have to tell you though, lymphedema is a challenge to treat. It truly is indeed. As far as lymphatic filariasis, there's medication and palliative care. In other words, supportive type care, but really prevention is key. And it can be really a devastating illness. I'll take a moment. I'll just show you briefly here as far as all right. And again, this is called elephantiasis also. And you'll see here, folks, as far as, yeah, so this is just very sad. Look at the right lower extremity compared to the left. But look at how folks, that's devastating, right? Indeed, that's devastating. And yeah, it's really very sad. And now there are medications that are preventative and mosquito nets and different things, but remember that the mosquito is the vector. Okay, so here you'll see. Let's take a look at this for a moment here. I'll just show you this real quick. Yeah, so take a look at the cycle here as far as the mosquito takes a blood meal, right, from a patient. And then what will happen is that the adults of these nematodes, these worms, will end up being in the lymphatic system, in the vessels. The adults produce sheathed microfilariae that migrate into the lymph and blood channels. The mosquito takes a blood meal and see, like, this is how it gets passed on. Takes a blood meal from the patient who is infected with the worms, right, from the parasite, and then the microfilariae shed sheaths, penetrate the mosquito's midgut, and migrate to the thoracic muscles. It's in the larval stages, and then it migrates to the head and the mosquito's proboscis to then infect another person. Yeah, it's terrible stuff. It really is, and so really a very tough illness to deal with and to treat. All right, so we have another 2 slides here from this presentation I'd like to just share with you all regarding non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Okay, so you'll see here as far as non-Hodgkin's and Hodgkin's lymphoma, we'll discuss. I'll just show you something that'll just help you to understand the difference between the two as far as these carcinogenic, this cancer forming illness here. So you see here as far as stage 1, localized disease, single lymph node affected, right, or single organ. Stage 2, 2 or more lymph nodes are affected, right, on the same side of the diaphragm. So if you see the diaphragm here, same side. Stage 3, on both sides of the diaphragm, right, and then widespread going to multiple organs and throughout for stage 4. Now, as far as that's Hodgkin's, so you'll see here, Hodgkin's disease, a localized single group of nodes, contiguous spread. Many patients have a relatively good prognosis with Hodgkin's. With non-Hodgkin's, it's a little bit more challenging. Multiple lymph nodes involved, extranodal involvement common, meaning outside of lymph nodes and outside of the lymphatic system, non-contiguous spread. These Reed-Sternberg cells are present in Hodgkin's disease. I want to show you because they're very interesting looking as far as under the microscope. But I would tell you that that's one of the key diagnostic tools that we use, the Reed-Sternberg cells. And you're going to see that they're kind of a very odd-shaped cell, okay? So here we have these Reed-Sternberg cells. So here's a normal lymphocyte. You see here these Reed-Sternberg cells, double nuclei and such. Here we go again. There we go. So they're very distinct as far as their presence and as far as their look. Let's show here. Yeah, so as known as lacunar histiocytes for different types, distinctive giant cells found with light microscopy and biopsies from individuals with Hodgkin's lymphoma, right? Derived from B lymphocytes, classically considered crippled germinal center B cells. So these are B lymphocytes that are not your B lymphocytes. Again, these are going to be part of your specific immune response producing antibodies. Okay, they'll differentiate into plasma cells, which will in turn be the antibody producing cells of the body of the immune system. And let's see here. So in non-Hodgkin's, right? It'll involve the B cells, but there are none of these Reed-Sternberg cells present, which are unique in their presentation. Okay, non-Hodgkin's children and adults. In Hodgkin's, here you're looking at young adulthood and greater than 55. Right, so either it's young adult or older than 55 as far as their presence and such. And we'll just leave it at that. So I don't need you to don't memorize this, but just giving you some more additional information. Okay. All right, folks. So I'm going to bring everybody out for a moment here. So, all right, we're going to take like a 3 or 4 minute break, and then we're going to come back. So I'm going to keep I'm going to hide everyone. I'm going to keep the recording going so it's contiguous, and we're going to then go into the next PowerPoint presentation, like 3 minutes or so. Okay, so I'm going to shut off my camera for a moment there, and my mic, and I'll see you in about 3 minutes. So what time are we at right now? Let's do 4 minutes. We're at 5:24, so we'll begin at 5:28. All right, folks, I'll see you in a few minutes. Hi to everyone. And All right, folks, we'll start in 1 minute. Okay, so 1 minute to go. All right. Okay, folks, so we're going to begin again, and now we're going to be going into the immune system portion of the PowerPoint presentation and such. Okay, so I created 2 different PowerPoints with the lymphatic system and then the immune system. So now it's going to be PowerPoint number 2. Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to share my screen with you all. Hide everyone, share my screen, and we're going to proceed with then looking at, first I'll share this with you all, folks, because this is one of the primary immune responses would be, in your non-specific immune response would be inflammation, okay? And you should know the signs for inflammation. So these are all images that I'll be sharing with you all have been posted in documents and resources for this class, okay? So you'll see here that redness can occur as a result of inflammation, we get that, and swelling, we get that, edema. And then as a result of the increase, the vasodilation and the increase of blood flow to the area, it's going to feel warm. There's going to be heat present. And as a result of whatever type of damage is taking place, there can be also pain and discomfort experienced. And as a result of even just the excessive, the edema, the excessive fluid that's entering into the area that's been damaged can also stretch the tissues and cause pain and discomfort. And then as a result of this, a loss of function. Know that edema, short term, is not a bad thing because edema will aid in the process of bringing the specific immune cells to the area, as well as splinting the area. So if you've damaged the elbow, so in particular, we're looking at the elbow here, right? If you've damaged that in some way, then edema will help to splint it and prevent you from moving it, hence leading to a loss of function temporarily. So let's look at this PowerPoint presentation. I think you'll find it interesting. And we'll start with this slide right here. And this is really a great slide. This gives us a lot of information in a one slide here as far as your specific defenses and your non-specific defenses. I'll go to specific defenses first because we've talked about this throughout when we were discussing the B and T lymphocytes. So you'll see here that your specific immune response, your adaptive immunity, was your 3rd line of defense. Now know that these are all present at the same time. They're always going to be present. All 3 of these responses will be taking place, working in conjunction with each other. But know that as far as the T and B lymphocytes, production of antibodies from the plasma cells as a result of B lymphocytes differentiating, becoming plasma cells, which will in turn produce antibodies. And you'll see here as far as the memory cells also. So I've mentioned this side to you already. So the non-specific defenses, right, your innate immunity, you're born with it, right, would be the skin, be the mucous membrane, so present within the oral and nasal cavities, okay? Secretions of the skin and mucous membranes. So know that there are secretions present on the skin that provide a little bit of a, it's acidic, right? Not very acidic, but slightly acidic in order to combat the settling of our microbiome, which would be the microorganisms, bacteria that live on our body and live inside of our body, the microbiome. That's that community of those microorganisms. Healthy or mutualistic types of organisms that live on us and really provide we provide them with food and they provide us with protection from pathogenic bacteria, pathogenic microorganisms. They don't make us sick when they're on our body. Now, know this, that if we get a cut And those organisms, those microbes, those bacteria go from our skin to deep within our tissues. That can cause an infection because they're healthy on the skin, on the integument, on the epidermis, right? But they're not good when they're deeper into the other tissues and can create an infection, okay? That's the first line of defense. Second line of defense, you have here these phagocytic leukocytes. So neutrophils in particular you're thinking of. These are really involved in your primary response. They're like the first responders, the monocytes and the neutrophils. Okay, and remember the neutrophils never let monkeys eat bananas. They're the highest in the numbers as far as how many are produced. Antimicrobial proteins we'll talk about, as well as inflammatory response. So we're talking about complement in particular. We'll talk about that in more detail. The inflammatory response we just did mention, and also fever, knowing that a rise in your temperature, body temperature, your core body temperature, can be a way in order to allow the immune system to function optimally and really diminish the function of cells that have been infected, that they don't have as easy a time of things as far as their cell cycle in comparison to our immune system response when there's a fever present. Now this complement, okay, so let's do this. I'm going to step away for a moment here and show you an image of, well, let's go here. I didn't want to open up all the windows at once here, but let's go to our class, documents and resources. And you'll see here as far as, so you see your complement, there's two images. Here's one, and let me go here, and here's two. Now know that complement is approximately 20 proteins present within the blood that circulate in the inactive form. And when they become activated, they can end up creating what's called a cascade. The complement cells will help other immune cells to perform their functions, and activation of these complement will unleash inflammatory chemicals that'll amplify virtually all aspects of the inflammatory process. And again, there are these different ones you'll see here as far as 1, 4, 2, 3. I mean, there are 5. There are all of these different proteins coming together to create an issue where if this is the cell or the bacterium that's present within the body, they'll actually create a hole within that cell, within that, that compromised cell, the viral infected cell, within that bacterium, the plasma membrane. And in turn, if you create a hole within a cell, what's going to happen? Material is going to leak out, and that will lead to the death of a cell. Okay, let's look here as far as, so a couple of things here also, the functions of complement. And think of the term, an acronym, OIL, O-I-L. So think opsonization, inflammation, and lysis. And within the inflammation, you can think of immune clearance, okay? But really, if you think of these three right here for complement as far as its function, these approximately 20 proteins coming together in this, like I said, this cascade of one contributing to another, activating other of these proteins, bringing them together in order to what? One, opsonization promotes phagocytosis of particular antigens, okay? So what goes on is that they are marking these infected cells or these bacterium for destruction by macrophages, right? By neutrophils. Here, I for inflammation, right? Contributing to the inflammatory response, binding to specific complement receptors on cells of the immune system, triggering specific cell functions, right? Contributing to the inflammatory response, which is the initial response to any type of pathogen going on, as far as that first line of defense. And then lysis, that creating of that hole within the cells, the infected cells, the bacteria, the viral infected cells, the major effector of the humoral branch of the immune system. Meaning, we actually have a direct contact with those infected cells or the bacterium, and we're destroying them actively, okay? And again, it's the really in part of the non-specific immune response, okay? So opsonization, inflammation, lysis, right? Marking of a pathogenic cell for destruction, promoting inflammation, and direct cell destruction. Right? So if you know that for complement, you're good. Again, non-specific defense. It's not dependent upon prior antigen exposure. So hence it's the non-specific. So your memory B and T lymphocytes, yes, they have a memory. There's been a prior contact with the antigen. And so the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever it may be, subsequent responses to this antigen we've seen in the past, there's a quicker response, a more deadly response to whatever it is that we're coming in contact with that can make us sick, okay? And again, the skin, the normal flora, actually the microbiome is a better term. Mucous membranes, again, in the nasal and the oral cavities. Sneezing, coughing, tearing reflexes. Your tears will actually will contain chemicals within that will also contribute to antimicrobial properties. Elimination, an acidic environment, dealing with folks. So think about this also, that really the acid mantle, we call it, on the skin can be protective of the integument. As far as also in the digestive tract, your stomach is very acidic, and that acidic environment is present because any of the food that we're taking in can contain microbes that could make you sick, and most of them do not survive in acidic environment. Very important. So even though, yes, primary protein digestion takes place in the stomach, really one of the key issues is that acidic environment is really involved for destruction of microorganisms. And then you have inflammation also, a non-specific immune response. So the specific immune defense and response here, as far as these lymphocytes are concerned, these B and T lymphocytes. So we have here, right, these lymphocytes are precursors of many cells. And these cells that the B and T lymphocytes will differentiate and become are, you'll see here for the B lymphocytes, plasma cells. Again, plasma cells are involved in antibody production, okay? As far as, and then also memory cells for both B and T lymphocytes, right here. And the macrophages are monocytes, a type of agranulocyte, a white blood cell. They're the largest ones, right? The macrophages. There's really the monocytes become the macrophages. Sorry. The monocytes present in the blood, the white blood cells, they become, after a few days, they differentiate and become the macrophages, which will be actively involved in phagocytosis. And then you'll see here also, as far as helper T cells, killer T cells, or cytotoxic T cells, and you have your suppressor T cells, okay? And so you'll see here that the three of those helper T cells really are involved in activating your specific immune response. And so HIV attacks and really infects with a virus the helper T cells, inactivating the specific immune response, because the B cells and the plasma cells, they require helper T cells initiation and involvement, and really play an important role. The killer T cells are involved in actually directly destroying infected cells or bacteria or microbes. And then the suppressor T cells, once the immune response has done its job, we need to suppress the immune response. If we do not do this, folks, if we don't inhibit, they're also called inhibitory T cells, we don't inhibit the immune response, this can lead to an autoimmune response where we're attacking our own healthy tissues. That's a bad thing. All right, we'll see here. So it's also known as, so know this here, viruses, right, are considered, we would consider a virus an infection particle. Is it really a living, when we talk about life, viruses will contain DNA, RNA, right, strands, double or single stranded, depending upon the virus. They're infectious particles. They don't have the organelles present in order to reproduce itself, okay? So what they do is they infect a cell and hijack those components of the cell in order to reproduce themselves. And like I said, with the helper T cells, HIV, that virus attacks those helper T cells and really destroys a patient's immune system and suppresses that immune response. Humoral immunity, this is a term that's used to describe the B lymphocytes and what they do, okay? We would say cellular immunity is another term that we would use for the T lymphocyte response. So I'll repeat that. Humoral immunity is used for the B lymphocytes and their response in the immune function of the immune system. Cellular immunity would be a term used to describe the T lymphocytes and their response. Again, I said to you that the B lymphocytes mature in the bone marrow, the bone marrow. T lymphocytes mature in the thymus gland, okay? And you'll see here, as far as the antibodies, I need to fix this a little bit here. There we go. Let's do this. Because you're not seeing that. Yeah, see? Interesting. All right, I knew it was missing a sentence there, right? The B lymphocytes become the plasma cells. The plasma cells are producing the antibodies. And good, okay. The T lymphocytes, I said about the cellular immunity, mature in the thymus gland, fight different viruses. So they fight many of the same things that can make you sick, right? You'll see here, as far as the term that we'll use, antigen. I've used this term before, right? So antigen. This is what will stimulate an immune response within the body. So the individual's immune system serves as the normal defense mechanism against the transmission of infectious agents. Okay, it's a good statement. The ability to recognize foreign agents. So these foreign agents are these antigens. So whether it's a bacteria, whether it's a virus infected cell, whether it's a cancer mutated cell of our own body. May I please see that sentence again? Say that. I'm sorry, I don't know. Say, when I'm talking about the antigen?
Dr. Perrone, for the slide that was, the sentence was kind of mixed in with the.
Oh yeah, just right here.
One more time, real quick.
You can fix that on your own. So this is just what was like kind of down below. The B lymphocytes become the plasma cells. The plasma cells are what produce the antibodies. So B lymphocytes on their own do not produce the antibodies. They differentiate and become plasma cells, which will in turn produce the antibodies. Good? You're welcome, no problem. So an antigen, right? So an antigen. So when we looked at and we were talking about blood typing, we said that there's type A blood, type B blood, right? And we said that there's type O blood. In type A blood, the red blood cell, the erythrocyte, has what? It has type A antigens present on the plasma membrane of the erythrocyte of the red blood cell. Type B blood has what? B antigens present on the plasma membrane of the erythrocyte. Type O blood has neither A or B antigens present, right, on the plasma membrane of the red blood cell. So these antigens are what really trigger the immune response, and they're present on the plasma membrane of an infected cell, right? Know that antigens, cells that are infected, that can be processed by a macrophage, and then the macrophage itself can present on its own plasma membrane parts of the microbe that could make us sick, and that will, in order to stimulate the immune response of the body. Okay, it's pretty remarkable. So antibodies protect the body against antigens. They will mark a cell that's infected. They'll mark a cell that's a bacteria, that's a non-self, right? They'll mark it for destruction. So antibodies don't necessarily directly destroy a cell, right? That's a non-self. That's a foreign cell that could cause us sickness and illness. But they'll mark it for destruction by neutrophils, by macrophages, by cytotoxic T cells, by natural killer cells. Do you understand that they'll mark them, say, hey, this is a bad cell, and have the cleanup crew take care of it, so to speak. Okay. So an antigen, foreign protein in our body. Okay, so it's foreign. So the body recognizes self and non-self. All right. So these B lymphocytes, again, they differentiate into plasma cells, which will in turn produce antibodies. Okay, produce antibodies in response to antigens. The antibodies bind to a specific antigen. Antigens will precipitate and actually come into an area where these different phagocytic type cells will be able to recognize them as non-self and devour them via phagocytosis. Now, antibodies themselves, there are specific types of antibodies, right? There's not just one that's being produced, okay? So they're immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins are part of the types of plasma proteins present in the plasma of the blood, right? Immunoglobulins, okay? You'll see here, as far as they have a very distinct type shape, and some are larger than others. We'll see that in a moment. And you'll see here that these, really it's the binding sites are at the tips of the Y. So look at this here, as far as pretty cool. The binding sites are here, looks like a Y, and you'll see that there are, I don't need you to know that there are heavy and light chains and such, but just know that this is a protein, okay? Proteins, and this I do need you to know, okay? IgG, IgA, IgM, IgD, and IgE. And you need to know that first off, the IgM are the largest and the first antibodies that are produced as far as an immune response is concerned. IgG, right? They're attacking viruses, bacteria, toxins, right? They activate the complement cascade, those proteins. There are approximately 20 proteins, right, involved in that cascade there. They're the greatest in number, the IgG. IgA, I mentioned to you that they're present in the tears, in the tears, saliva, sweat, IgA. Okay? In the secretions, you could say IgA. IgD on the surface, found on the surface of B lymphocytes, and IgE associated with allergic reactions. So you'll need to please know, I won't ask you to pick out them, but know that the IgM are the largest, and what they are released in, pardon, shows up when being tested for active disease. Yes, correct. Active immunity, passive immunity. So this I'm going to show you next is that this is a very interesting slide. I've given you 2 slides here regarding this, but let's understand this a bit here. So if I'm passive regarding something, am I really doing any type of active part as far as the immune response is concerned? And I would say no. So passive immunity, we have natural and artificial. Artificial as a result of like a serum that you've been in, that has been injected in you. This is a blood product, this artificial passive. It's a blood product. So in response to, say, I talked about this, I believe, regarding my children being exposed to a rabid bat. And not only were they given the rabies vaccine, right, which would stimulate their immune system to respond to the rabies virus, but also they were given this blood product, which is this gamma globulin. This is a blood product. This is a serum that has been produced, right, outside of someone's body, right, so that they're able to produce it in the lab and inject this blood product. So immediately, if there's any type of rabies virus present, this blood product, this artificial passive gamma globulin injection, this blood product can be injected into the patient, and they can right away mount an immune response towards the vaccine. Okay, they're not waiting for the body to react as far as in this active artificial, where you've been given a vaccine and your body will take a period of time in order to respond to these particles that are really subdued, so that they're not going to make you sick, but they're going to help you to mount an immune response via the vaccine. So this is active as far as vaccines are concerned, artificial because you're being given this vaccine, natural as a result of you're actually being exposed to an infection. So I'm out in the public and I get exposed to a cold virus, then I end up getting the cold. My natural active immunity will be involved in that exposure to that virus, and then I come down with that cold per se. Now, natural passive, you'll see here as far as the maternal antibodies to the fetus via the placenta or via the breast milk, okay, and in particular the colostrum, very important. Okay, So let's look at here as far as the examples. So I think that these next two slides will help you kind of better picture it in your head. So you'll see here as far as active and passive. So passive we're looking at, right, via breast milk, via the placenta, a natural immune response, passive from mom. Passive artificial, we're looking at then, right, this blood product here. This contains these antibodies that have already been produced and that you just receive those already produced antibodies to fight whatever it is that's going on, a serum, right? Whereas in active, natural and active artificial, you actually been exposed to the infection and you come down with that infection, with the virus, and you come down with that infection or that bacterium. In the case of artificial, you've been vaccinated, and so that would be active artificial immune response. Or you can see here as far as naturally acquired, artificially acquired. Naturally acquired active, you were exposed to the virus, the bacterium. Passive, right, you're receiving from mom, from the placenta, or from the breast milk. Artificially acquired, active, it's a vaccine you've been given. Or passive, these antibodies have already been preformed. You're receiving this blood product via injection or through, other means and such, and you're actually right away, very quickly, forming an immune response because it's been injected into you. Okay. So there's always a few questions regarding this, folks, okay? So really, this is important. I really want you to understand the difference between artificial and passive, and natural and artificially acquired, okay? All right, so you see here, natural immunity, you're born with it, it's inherited, it's permanent. Acquired, right, natural, as far as for the means of being exposed to it, or artificial as far as a vaccine is concerned. Good, okay. And passively acquired immunity as a result of the antibodies that are already preformed. So as far as the cells are concerned, so we have mentioned these cells before, and I'm just going to give you a little bit more of an information regarding them. So as far as the B cells are concerned, the B lymphocytes, right? T cells, T lymphocytes. So B lymphocytes, they produce the antibodies, right? As a result of the plasma cells, okay? Helper T cells, these are really what are called your CD4 cells, okay? They will stimulate production of cytotoxic T cells and also really activate the production of more B cells, B lymphocytes, and in particular then plasma cells, which will produce antibodies. So helper T cells are very important as far as the immune response is concerned, as far as they're really activating and initiating the specific immune response. These CD8 cells, right, become these cytotoxic T cells. So these cytotoxic T cells actively engage infected cells or foreign invaders, right? Virus invaded cells, cancer cells, reject body grafts, right? This is the cytotoxic T cells actively involved in not only just seeing something that's marked for destruction, but they actually actively destroy these cells. And the memory T cells, memory B cells have an actual memory of the encounter with these different antigens. The suppressors T cells, or the inhibitory T cells, they are involved in slowing down the activities of the immune response. As the infection is subsiding, we need to initiate these suppressor T cells so that we don't continually have such a high level of inflammatory response. If someone has a chronic inflammatory response, right, that's in the case of something like rheumatoid arthritis, it's a systemic type of situation where it's not only just affecting the joints, but really affecting many other systems. And as such, we need to calm that immune response down. Having this high level of immune response and the ability to attack other tissues, not healthy, folks, not at all. And the macrophages, they are like the cleanup crew. They're involved in actual phagocytosis of these different antigens. They engulf, they digest them. They also help to activate the immune response so that other cells present within the immune response can respond. Now, there are different types of chemicals that are released and such. Lymphokines and interleukins are released by lymphocytes and macrophages, and they really are involved in just really intensifying the immune response, okay? And really very, very important as far as you'll see here, like activated macrophages release these cytokines, again, chemicals released in order to then stimulate the immune response. You'll see here complements cause breakdown of the microorganisms and enhance the inflammatory process, releasing these particles that will help to activate the immune system and the immune response. These lymphokines here released by sensitized T cells. These are T cells that are recognizing that their encounters with the antigens. Also, just again, these multiple chemicals, these monokines also released by macrophages, released by the T cells, all contributing to the different aspects of the primary, secondary, and tertiary response to infection, to antigens. Quite incredible. You'll see here as far as the skin is concerned. So not only does the, let me come back here. I'll come back to the skin in just one moment. The tears and the saliva, right? These secretions containing the IgA, right? IgA and immunoglobulins, as well as a substance called lysozyme. This lysozyme also is involved in actively engaging in destruction of the bacteria, destroying the bacteria. Coming back to the skin, I said to you that the acid mantle, it's a slight acidity to the skin as a result of the chemicals that are released onto the skin, as well as the oil, right, from the sebaceous glands released onto the hair, right? The hair shaft has an antibacterial quality to it. Mucous membranes, the hydrochloric acid of the stomach, we've mentioned this already, right? So the mucous membranes, the mucus is sticky, and so know that that stickiness will also help to trap microorganisms and debris, and even allow for then the contact with your tonsils to start the whole immune response, as well as the hydrochloric acid is very acidic. Again, it's involved in protein digestion, the beginning of, as well as the destruction of microorganisms that do not tolerate the acidic environment. Now, can H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, which is a bacterium that is present in cases of different types of ulcers and such, pyloric and gastric ulcers, yes, that is a acid-loving type of a microorganism, but primarily most microorganisms do not like an acidic environment and do not survive in acidic environment. Immunization, as far as a process of increasing an individual's resistance to an infection by artificial means, right? So again, we're talking about an active artificial, right? Because it's an artificial means that we're given this injection, and then our body will actively be involved in creating an immune response to whatever we've been injected with, okay? And you'll see here as far as autoimmune disorders, we've talked about this. Body mistakenly targets normal cells or cells that are considered self, right? Because we have self and non-self. Well, those that are considered non-self would be foreign types of cells, bacterial cells, viruses, virus-infected cells, cancer cells. This we need to respond to. Can be a genetic familial predisposition, right? Viral causes or some. Okay, yeah, so different triggers as far as for an autoimmune response. Again, this can, and many times we don't really understand the etiology of why someone suffers from an autoimmune disorder. Now, here are some disorders that I talked about myasthenia gravis, right? When I talked about the thymus gland. So weakness of skeletal muscles, antibodies attack the postsynaptic membrane. So understand this, right? As far as when you're thinking of the neuromuscular junction, the nerve muscle junction, right? So at that postsynaptic membrane, antibodies are attacking that and preventing then issues with the ability to contraction of skeletal muscle. That's a problem. We've talked about Addison's disease, right? So hypo, low levels of cortisol present. So the patient that has Addison's is not going to respond to stressful situations very well, right? The antibodies are attacking the cortex of the adrenal glands. Hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's disease, hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease. These are examples of each of these, right? So you'll see here with hypothyroidism, it's chronic inflammation, progressive destruction of the thyroid gland. In hyperthyroidism, the antibodies, if it's hyper, there's too much thyroid hormone, and the body is very jacked up as far as the metabolism, the metabolic rate. And so antibodies mimic thyroid stimulating hormone, so which in turn will increase more release of thyroid hormone, hence hyperthyroidism. Okay? So you'll need to know in hyperthyroidism, it's Graves' disease. In hypothyroidism, it's, as far as autoimmune is concerned, it's Hashimoto's. Lupus, or SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus. It's chronic inflammatory disease. It's in the family of the rheumatoid variants, and really systemic. And you can see the butterfly rash can affect the joints, cardiovascular system, the urinary system. It's a nasty illness. I have on my dad's side of the family, we have my dad has 5 sisters, and within that side of the family, there are those that have multiple sclerosis and SLE present, and it's and also scleroderma, another type of autoimmune disease. Multiple sclerosis we know about, demyelinating disorder, Guillain-Barré, also a demyelinating disorder, but of the peripheral nervous system, MS of the central nervous system. And scleroderma I mentioned to you also. Chronic connective tissue disorder primarily affects the skin and can create issues where, like, so for my aunt, around her oral cavity, around her mouth and such, the tissues of her, that area there of her face had become very tight. And so extremely difficult to even get food in her mouth and to have dental work done. And it affects other parts of the body, not just those areas there. So scleroderma, it's again another nasty autoimmune disorder, again in the family of the rheumatoid types of disorders. You'll see here rheumatoid arthritis, chronic destructive joint inflammation, and can it affect the heart and other areas of the body? Absolutely. Psoriasis, this is an overproduction of epidermis cells, and you'll see it has like a white flaky type issues, and there can be redness, inflammation involved with psoriasis. Pernicious anemia we talked about as far as deficiency of B12 as a result of destruction of the stomach mucosa, leading to this deficiency of B12, which can affect the erythrocytes and their ability to divide. So it's pernicious anemia can be a bad disorder, and it can lead to a decrease in erythrocytes circulating through the cardiovascular system in the blood. Type 1 diabetes, also considered an autoimmune disorder, attacking those beta cells which produce insulin. Ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So I want you to give you a little bit of an insight as far as when you're thinking of these two disorders, you think, well, they're both chronic inflammation of, the distal portion of the digestive tract. Well, take a look here and see that. So with Crohn's disease, right, it can affect small intestine, large intestines. For ulcerative colitis, think that it's affecting more of the distal portion of the digestive tract and of the colon in particular. Okay, colon, the rectum. Okay. So hypersensitivities. So hypersensitivities, you're thinking of allergic responses, right? So when the body's immune system fails to protect itself against a foreign material, against these allergens, right, that can trigger a hypersensitivity response. Anaphylaxis or anaphylactic shock is a medical emergency, and if a patient is having issue with feeling like their throat is closing up and they can't breathe, this is very much a situation where they need to, one, have some type of antihistamine, so like a strong antihistamine like Benadryl, and they need to get to the hospital. They can get an EpiPen, right? If they've been stung by bees and they're allergic and they have this anaphylactic shock, folks, this can lead to death. So it's a medical emergency. Many times patients will have these medical alert tags notating that they are severely allergic to something. You'll see here that swelling of the conjunctiva, runny nose, swelling of the lips, tongue, or throat, right? If the throat swells, right, if there's swelling taking place here, is that going to affect your ability to breathe? Absolutely. The heart and vasculature, fast or slow heart rate, low blood pressure, not good. You see here as far as hives, itchiness, flushing, pelvic pain, lightheadedness, loss of consciousness, confusion, headache, anxiety, respiratory system, shortness of breath, wheezing, hoarseness, pain with swallowing, cough. Yeah, so note also, like, if someone is coughing and they're coughing quite frequently, this could be like as a result of some type of respiratory distress, and that it's not just a matter of that, oh, they have a cough or a cold or something, they're coughing. No, it can be as a result of they're having difficulty breathing. You'll see here as far as even with anaphylaxis here, as far as crampy abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomiting, loss of bladder control. Again, too, folks, this is a dire emergency. Changes in heart rate or palpitations, never any good. All right. Now we're thinking of HIV and AIDS. So HIV, right, can progress into AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, right? So it's not inherited, right? It's acquired. It affects the immune system, refers to the body's natural defense against cancers, disease, infections, deficiency, lacking of this cellular immunity. Cellular immunity deals with the T cells, okay? Cellular immunity. And the syndrome, it involves a set of disease or conditions that are present and that will affect how the body's immune system functions. So this HIV virus, this immunodeficiency virus, can lead to AIDS, right? Destroys the CD4 lymphocytes, which differentiate and become the helper T cells. And so when it affects the helper T cells, the specific immune response is affected. And it affects not only the T cells, but also the B cells. Opportunistic infections, infections that your body normally could handle these infections, and with the natural immune response, your immune response has been inhibited, it's been suppressed, and as a result, these infections can make you very sick and can actually lead to death for these patients. Okay, so you'll see here as far as 3 outcomes from the infection: AIDS, AIDS-related complex, and asymptomatic infection. So really know that the medication that's available to patients now in comparison to 5 and 10 years and 15 years ago, it's quite remarkable. I'll just share with you something also as far as a personal side, as far as for my family. My father has 5 sisters, and one of his sisters, her husband ended up being involved in some bad things and drugs, and he went to prison, and he actually died of AIDS in prison. And this was back in the 80s, when this was just all starting out, and they didn't understand what was going on and what was present with AIDS. So it affects many families more than you may think, as far as just regular folks that just, you wouldn't expect have this kind of interaction with. And it's sad stuff for sure. Yeah, it is indeed, for sure. And he had, 4 kids. So very sad, and they've all since, they're grown now. They're younger than me. They're in their 30s and such, but still very sad. All right, so yeah, and know that also, that how about when the blood supply wasn't protected, so that people who had hemophilia and other issues where they needed blood products were receiving transfusions, and they're receiving transfusions that some had actually received HIV virus as a result of these tainted transfusions, and ended up dying as a result of coming down with HIV and then AIDS before the medications were really available in order treatment was really productive as it is today. And so know that, right? So sexual contact, sharing needles, the infection can be passed from the mother to the baby. Transfusions, as I said before. And so, okay. And these are the different screening tests that are available. And if someone is very active, as far as someone is just active and has more than one partner, really, folks, you should be tested, not just for AIDS, but not just for HIV, but for other sexually transmitted infections. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, wow. Hmm. And you'll see here as far as symptoms and such. All right.